Today we are going to take you back to the 18th century, where we are going to examine the work of Boydell's graphic illustrations of Shakespeare. Here we have Shakespeare nursed by tragedy and comedy. And here we have a portrait of Alderman John Boydell. All the graphic illustrations you see here were arranged by him. And of course here we have the monument of Shakespeare in Stratford Church. Stay, passenger, why dost thou go so fast? Read, if thou canst, whom envious death hath placed within this monument. Shakespeare, with whom quick nature died, whose name doth deck the tomb, far more than cost, since all that he hath writ leaves living art but page to serve his wit. And here we have Shakespeare sitting on a rock between poetry and painting. And then off we go to Tempest, Act 1. A couple famous lines from Tempest. You taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse. Another good line from Tempest is, we are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with sleep. Here we have Act 3, Scene 1. Then off we go to Two Gentlemen of Verona. Here we are. A famous quote from this play is, you minion are too saucy. The next graphic illustration would be from Merry Wives of Windsor. Here we have Act 1, Scene 1. And then we go to Act 1, Scene 4. What is in my closet? The incident of Simple being found in the French doctor's closet. And then we will go to Act 2, Scene 1. Mrs. Page and Ford are comparing letters. Yes, here we have Mrs. Page and Ford. And then off we go to Act 4, Scene 1. Come hither, William. Come, hold your head. Come. Answer your master. Be not afraid. Then we have Act 5, Scene 5. Mrs. Page and Mrs. Ford. Here they are in Windsor Park at midnight. The next play is Measure for Measure. Here we have Act 2, Scene 4. Isabella interceding with Angelo. The scene represents an antique state apartment. Isabella, veiled, approaches Angelo, who is seated in his robes as the absent Duke deputy. Next would be Act 4, Scene 2. The clown engaged to execute Claudio. Angelo, having ordered Claudio's death, here we have that scene, and the next play will be Comedy of Errors. Here we have Act 1, Scene 1, the shipwreck of Aegeon and his twin sons. Here he is with his wife and twin sons and the shipwreck. And then off we go to Act 4, Scene 4. The next graphic illustration will be from the play Much Ado About Nothing. Here we have Act 3, Scene 1. Ursula and Hero wishing to inspire Beatrice with passion for Benedict. The next scene would be Act 3, Scene 3. This is a street in Messina where we have Baraccio, the follower of Don John. And the next one will be Act 4, Scene 1. Here it is. Hero is accused, he faints in church. The marriage of Claudio and Hero. Next, Act 4, Scene 2. Baraccio and Conrad examined. In a plot with Don John against Hero. Next, Act 5, Scene 4. Hero discovers herself to Claudio. An apartment in Leonardo's house. And then we are off to the play Love's Labor Lost. Act 3, Scene 2. The next act would be Act 5, Scene 2. The Princess of France receives a present from the King of Navarre, and her attendants doubt the sincerity. And then we're off to A Midsummer Night's Dream, Act 2, Scene 1. I am that merry wanderer of the night. I jest to Oberon and make him smile. When I a fat and bean-fed horse beguile, neighing in likeness of a silly foe. But room, fairy, here comes Oberon. The next scene will be Act 2, Scene 3. Robin Goodfellow. Through the forest I have gone, but Athenian found I none, on whose eyes I might approve this flower's force in stirring love. From a play, Midsummer Night's Dream. Next we go off to the play Merchant of Venice. Antonio, having by losses at sea forfeited his bond to Shylock, on the left there, Shylock of Venice, and he insists on the horrid penalty, a pound of the merchant's flesh. Antonio and his friend Salanio appeal to his mercy, but in vain. And then you have the jailer, the Shylock who wants a pound of flesh from the merchant in the Merchant of Venice. Next play is As You Like It, Act 2, Scene 1. Jacques in the Forest of Ardennes. And then we go on to the next act. Orlando encourages Adam. Next would be Act 4, The Bloody Handkerchief, in the Forest of Ardennes. After she sees the bloody handkerchief as proof, she faints into the arms of her attendant, Celia. Next, Act 5, Scene 4. Here we find that Rosalind is reconciled to her father and offers her hand to Orlando. The next play would be Taming of the Shrew. Petruchio's Mad Wedding. Catherine begs to be returned to her father, but Petruchio, determined to break her spirit, insists on proceeding to his own house. Next, in Act 4, Scene 5, Catherine, finding opposition vain, becomes a dutiful wife to Petruchio. The next play is All's Well That Ends Well, Act 1, Scene 3, Countess and Helena. Here she tries to convince the Countess to let her love Bertram follow her to France. The Countess finally consents, and then we're off to Act 2, Scene 3, in the state chamber in the King of France palace. Helen, by her skill, restored the king's health and is told to demand her reward. She requests the hand of the man that she will be married to. The nobles are assembled and she selects Bertram. The next play is Twelfth Night. Viola's visit to Olivia. Viola is disguised as a page. And then we go to Act 2, Scene 3. Toby and Sir Andrew are drunk. Sir Andrew, a foolish knight, pretending to love Olivia. And then we go to Act 4, Scene 3. Olivia mistakes Sebastian for Viola. Olivia's garden and Sebastian, the supposed lost brother of Viola, having come by accident to Olivia's house, is mistaken by her for Orsinio's page. The next play is Winter's Tale, Act 2, Scene 1. From here we go to Act 2, Scene 3. The scene represents a state chamber in the royal palace of Sicily. And the next act, the next graphic illustration will be Act 4, Scene 3, Sheep Shearing. The king attends a rustic festival in disguise. And then we're off to the play Macbeth. Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 3, The Three Witches. Thunder and lightning. In Act 3, Scene 4, we have the ghost of Banquo, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Here they are scared of the ghost. And then Macbeth, Act 5, Scene 1. Here we go. Lady Macbeth walks in her sleep. Doctor and a waiting woman and a lady. Guilt and the dangers that menace her husband's throne as she walks in her sleep. The next play is King John, Act 3, Scene 3. Constance, having in vain endeavored to interest the king and legate in behalf of her son Arthur's claim to the crown. In the next act, Act 4, Scene 3, John, feeling insecure, commissions his creature Hubert to put the eyes out of Arthur. He decides to spare him, but even after sparing Arthur, he leaps to his death and is found dead. The next play is King Richard II. Off the coast of Wales, Richard, having heard of Bolingbroke's return from banishment and his attempt to take the crown, Richard lands on the coast of Wales from his Irish expedition, and he receives news of his rival's progress. And the next act of King Richard II is Act 5, Scene 2. Duke and Duchess of York. Here we have the Duke of York's palace. The Duke finds a paper carelessly concealed on his son's person, and he seizes it, and he finds a treasonable plot to restore Richard to the throne, of which he vows immediately to inform the king. In the next play, the first part of King Henry IV, Act 2, Scene 1, at Inn Yard at Rochester. Good morrow, carriers. What's o'clock? I think it to be 2 o'clock. Aye. Lend my lantern. And then we go to Act 2, Scene 3. Lady Percy and Hotspur. Hotspur is about to join the Northern Confederacy against Henry IV. Persuaded by his wife to disclose his plans and what his journey is up to. Act 4, Scene 4. Falstaff's cowardice. Falstaff, having joined the royal army in a slight encounter with Douglas, pretends to be slain. And the next play is the second part of King Henry IV. Prince Henry returns the crown. King Henry and the Prince. The state bedchamber. Henry, near his death, orders the crown to be placed on his pillow. In the next scene, Act 5, Scene 5, Falstaff is discarded. Henry IV being dead, and his son the Prince having succeeded to the throne, is represented in the scene returning from his coronation at Westminster. The next play would be King Henry V. Here we are on Act 3, Scene 3. Henry, having invaded France on her breach of treaty, sets down with his troops. He summons them to surrender, but he is answered with contempt and determines to take it by storm, in which he succeeds. Next play, first part of King Henry VI. Origins of the red and white roses. Temple Garden, London. Next scene is Act 2, Scene 5, Mortimer, dying interview with his nephew. Then we go to Act 2, Scene 5. Mortimer, apparently near his end, is considerably more emaciated. And then we're off to the next play, first part of King Henry VI. Here we have Joan La Pucelle, the extraordinary success which attended the French armies under Joan in raising the siege of Orleans made the English think her victories had something to do with magic. So when she was captured, on being captured by the English, she was, with a cruelty that marked the ferocity of the age, she was burnt as a witch. On to second part of King Henry VI, Act 2, Scene 2. The Duke of York's garden. Salisbury and Warwick, who from the first dispute in the Temple Gardens became convinced of the right to the crown. Act 3, Scene 2, Queen Margaret. The faction against the Duke of Suffolk, having obliged the king to send him into banishment, he takes leave of the queen. He was afterwards taken at sea and beheaded in a little cockboat. Henry himself dethroned. In next act, Act 3, Scene 3, the horrible end of Cardinal Beaufort, uncle to King Henry VI. A prey to his keenest remorse, the wretched prelate is represented on his deathbed. The king with his nobles pays him a visit. On to the next play, which is the third part of King Henry VI, Act 3, Scene 2. Lady Grey petitions Edward IV. Lady Grey petitioning Edward for the restoration of the lands forfeited by her husband's adherence to the House of Lancaster. Then we're off to Act 5, Scene 5, the gallant behavior of Prince Edward. Prince Edward and his mother Margaret, son and wife to King Henry VI. They have been taken prisoner after a fatal battle. Next play is King Richard III. Prince Henry the Duke of York, Gloucester. The royal brothers passing time at the Towers. Next is Act 3, Scene 4. Council room in the Tower. Hastings, having proved himself decidedly adverse to Gloucester's plans to take the crown, he impeaches him of treason and sorcery. His immediate execution. Off to Act 4, Scene 3. Murder of the princes. So at midnight, executing their dreadful task, the gentle babes lay girdling one another within their alabaster innocent arms. A book of prayer upon their pillow lay, and so was smothered. Onward to the next play, King Henry VIII. Act 1, Scene 4. Henry's first sight of Anne. Act 3, Scene 2. Onward to Act 5, Scene 1. Queen Catherine's last illness. Heartbroken at her divorce from the king and feeling her end approach, Catherine listens to her attendant. Act 5, Scene 1. King Henry. King Henry VIII in his most famous pose. On to the next play, Coriolanus, Act 1, Scene 3. Marcia's house in Rome. Act 4, Scene 5. Fired with rage, he vows the destruction of Rome. In the next play, Julius Caesar, Act 3, Scene 1. Mark Antony and the dead body of Caesar. Caesar, having been assassinated by Brutus and the other conspirators in the Senate house, his friend Mark Antony weeps. In the next act of Julius Caesar, Act 5, Scene 5, the death of Brutus. To let him fall on his sword, and he is slain. In the next play, Antony and Cleopatra. Takes a last farewell of Cleopatra, preparatory to the battle with Caesar. In the next play, we have Timon of Athens, Act 1, Scene 2. Timon, surrounded by a crowd of parasites, is distributing to one of them a rich jewel, nearly the last remains of his wealth. His friend, the philosopher, warns him of the consequences. In the next scene, Act 4, Scene 1, Timon renounces society. Outside the walls of Athens, abandoned and treated with the blackest ingratitude of those he has enriched and served, Timon spurns the hated city of his residence, and renouncing human society, seeks shelter in the forest. In the next play, we have Titus Andronicus. No grace, no womanhood, ah, beastly creature, confusion fall. Nigh then, I'll stop your mouth. Aaron protects his infant son, the illegal issue of the Moor Aaron. When Aaron snatches the infant from his nurse and vows vengeance to anyone who touches it. In the next play, we have Troilus and Cressida. Cressida's uncle, wishing to inspire his niece with a passion for Troilus, the Trojan prince and a son to the king. Next act, Act 5, Scene 3. He rushes to combat and is slain by Achilles. In the next play, we have Cymbeline. Act 2, Scene 2. Cymbeline's palace in Britain. Then we go to Cymbeline, Act 2, Scene 4, in Rome. Returned from Britain with the tokens he has stolen. Act 3, Scene 6. Bellario's cave. The next play is King Lear. Act 1, Scene 1, King of France. King Lear, having discarded Cordelia for her sincerity and conferred the kingdom on her hypocritical sisters. Onward to Act 3, Scene 4. He appears bareheaded in a stormy night, without shelter. Act 4, Scene 7. Cordelia, introduced to her distracted father, pathetically implores his blessing. The next play is Romeo and Juliet. Act 1, Scene 2. Romeo's first interview with Juliet. And then onward to Act 2, Scene 5. Here, Juliet confides to her nurse. Yes, Juliet talking to the nurse with no luck. Act 3, Scene 5. Romeo takes leave of Juliet. Act 4, Scene 5. Juliet's supposed death. She took some opiates, but only made her temporarily look like she was dead. But Romeo thought she had passed. So Romeo takes the poison and dies himself, only for Juliet to awaken after he has taken the poison. And of course, she kills herself in the arms of Romeo. The next play is Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 4. A ghost appears to Hamlet. The Queen's closet. Hamlet. Her father's ghost at the moment appears to him. The Queen, to whom it is invisible. Act 4, Scene 7. She fell in the weeping brook and drowned. The next play is Othello. Here he demands the handkerchief that he gave her, but it was stolen. And she cannot give him the handkerchief, and he is enraged. He does not know what to do. She apologizes, but to no use. In the next scene, Act 5, Scene 2, Othello enters his wife's chamber at midnight, wakes her, and charges her with having loved Cassio. And then he smothers her while asking for mercy.